It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, June 3rd, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is excited to talk draft combine, Russ.
The NHL Combine is back. I'm so excited.
All right, let's get going with the show.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here with Russ Cohen, who's on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow Locked On Flyers on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You'll keep up to date on all the Flyers news and our episodes, all that good stuff. You can also email the show at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. On today's show, we're going to talk about the NHL Draft Combine. It's kind of this mystery process that we hear little dribs and drabs about, but we don't really know what it gets us in the end sometimes. So I'm excited to talk to Russ about that. We are going to do a prospect profile for the draft on Marco Kasper. And it's Friday, so we'll finish up the week as we do with Gritty. Locked On Flyers is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you are listening. So subscribe. You'll get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We're also over on YouTube. So check us out over there as well. Just a quick programming note. We're recording this episode a little bit early because of our scheduling. So if there's any Flyers news that drops, we'll get to it on Monday's show unless there's something huge like a coaching hire, in which case we'll definitely put something in your feeds about that. So the NHL Combine is something that's really cool. I think most of us know it because of the fitness tests that they do for all the players, but there's a lot more to it. And most big pro sports have something along these lines. So why do sports have these kinds of things in general?
Yeah, and the NHL was a little later getting to it than like the NFL. Well, first thing is they figured out, hey, we've got all these prospects in one spot. And even though we've informally met and introduced ourselves to them and maybe chatted a couple minutes during the season, this is a chance to, if we want, have a psychologist in the room when we talk to a player, or if we want, have 3 or 4 people from our organization sitting in the room talking to a player, or if they want, have everybody sitting in the room talking to the player, but only one person speaks and maybe nobody else says anything, or maybe you have a guy like Steve Yzerman who's just writing down notes but doesn't say anything. All kinds of different situations, but it's kind of like a job interview.
So it's in Buffalo this year for the NHL, and it's there a lot. Why do they do it in Buffalo?
Well, they used to do it in some pretty meager places in like a gym and everything. And as it's grown, Buffalo has this place called the Harbor Center, and it's great. I covered women's hockey there. I've covered men's hockey there. Like the Sabres haven't played there, but other leagues have. It's a great setup. It's right
It
near
really is.
right near the rink. It's easy to park. It's easy to get to. That's why.
Yeah, I love that whole complex up
Yeah.
there, and I think it does, logistically, it's a really good spot for it. I've been to the Harbor Center rink many times as well, and it's a nice little venue with some really good areas to break out and have different rooms with different things going on while there's
Hotels
stuff going.
connected.
Yeah, like there's stuff going on the ice, so that's a really good thing. And I'm wondering from the prospect side of things, like what purpose does it serve for them and like what is their experience like going into it?
So I've asked of quite a few guys about it this year because it hasn't been around in a couple of years because of the pandemic. And they're looking forward to it because they've watched it before or seen photos. And believe it or not, if they threw up on the VO2 max, they wouldn't care. They'd feel like they're part of the group. They like showing off. They're athletes. They like showing off. They like showing you what they can do. And that's the whole thing of this. Some of them had time and they practice. There are places that, that have this set up so players can go there and practice the combine if they want to. Some don't have the time, and this year, because of the timing of it, some great players won't be there because they'll be playing in the playoffs. But they're like, hey, if I'm going to miss the combine because I'm playing in the playoffs, I can live with it. But if not, they want to be at the combine because they know all the scouts are there. They know, believe it or not, this is where they like the media because we shine a light on a lot of these players before a draft. And believe it or not, teams do look around, look at what's written, look at some of these interviews, even though they've done their own interviews, because they want to see as much about a player and research as much about a player before they pick them, because every player is worth, millions of dollars to them. Like, it's a millions of dollar investment. So you have to be thorough.
I always wonder if there's subtle ways that players kind of signal whether or not they're particularly interested in a team, and vice versa. If the teams can really give clues to the players whether or not they're interested in drafting them.
I mean, players try and pick up on it, and they'll talk to us about it. And some will say, especially after the fact, I knew they were going to pick me because, but sometimes they won't tell us, sometimes they will tell us. It's a fun little cat and mouse kind of situation. I don't think any player ever tells a team they won't play for them, but I do feel like when they go through interviews, the team could feel if a player is not going to be good for their system based on what they're talking to them about and what the answers are. And I don't think a player would ever do that consciously, but I do think subconsciously that happens, and in essence eliminates themselves from some of the teams. So that's why their agents, or if they're college-bound players and they're not allowed to have an agent, their advisors, they work with them. They practice. You got to remember, I've interviewed guys that have had Zoom calls for months already. For at least a month already. They've been talking to teams, but they still, even the players, understand the value of doing like the interview part in person, but even the workouts in person. And if we get into some of those, it matters a little. It all has a piece. It all matters a little bit. There'll be some people that say, it doesn't matter at all, and that's just wrong.
So, as far as the team side of things, like, what are they looking for from the players in these interviews?
So they're looking for guys that fit their sensibilities, like, not necessarily think like them, whatever, but you're my kind of player. Why are you my kind of player? Because you do all the little things. We like that in this organization. Or you have heart, or you show leadership, or you're a guy that's committed, or you're a guy that's just had this unbelievable story in his background, and you've overcome all these odds to make it here. Those kinds of things can sell a team aside from what they can do on the ice.
Yeah, that's always such a tough thing to read from the outside, right?
Yeah.
Because you're just kind of getting these little bits of information, and the kids are like, oh, I talked to this team, and I'm
Mhm.
excited about everybody, because they want to sell themselves to everybody, right? Because
Right.
it's the draft, and
And they
it's
want
their
us in
ticket.
the media to tell everybody that.
Yeah, yeah. But I love it because there's a lot of wide-eyed innocence to it, but at the same time, they have a job to do, and I think it
Mhm.
helps them just become more well-rounded people, and learning how to deal with the media and deal with these questions, and making themselves engaging, even if it's the 40th time they've answered the same question. Like, I kind of look at it the same way that the kind of film premiere media circuit
Yeah.
goes. So I just think it's a ton of fun. But I think the big
Well,
question
I want
that
to
a
hit on
lot of
something you mentioned, like, hey, this is the 40th time, that this guy has answered those kinds of questions. And, for one thing, sometimes they'll actually get questions that they've never been asked. And it's good if you're
Mhm.
the person that asked them that, to kind of get that first answer for them before they've had a chance to really go over this with other people and get coached up about it. But there have been times where I've interviewed a player and they were totally disengaged and totally like acting like you're kind of like um, trying to either fool me, or you haven't seen me, or you don't believe in me. So I don't really care about this interview. And I've witnessed some of those people, and I could tell you there's one in particular that hasn't made it to the NHL yet. That's a first rounder. So we'll see if that one makes it or not. Has a lot of talent, but was really a jerk.
Huh. That's amazing. I mean, it's frightening, but amazing nonetheless. I think the big marquee aspect of the combine are the fitness tests. So, just to kind of review, what are they and what do they tell you?
So, as an example, like the VO2 max where they're doing the bike, uh, that's one where they're going to be able to tell you, can a guy sort of be on the ice for 20 minutes if they're a forward and handle stress, and do they have the legs for it, and all of that stuff. And you get some surprising results. Like, as an example, in his draft year, Nick Cousins was one of those leaders in that. And Nick
Right.
Cousins is having a pretty good NHL career. So is that one of the reasons? It could be. Fitness, yeah, it could be, because he's not the biggest guy, he's not the best scorer, but he does get a fair amount of minutes, and maybe he can handle things in crunch time. There are things you can learn. There's things you could learn from the broad jump. If a broad jump is kind of like the same muscles that you use for two-step quickness. So if somebody sees the core is really good, says, all right, that's something. There's always a reason why they're doing certain exercises, and why people are watching, and why they look at the numbers after, because you don't draw big conclusions, but there are conclusions you can draw, and they're important. Any little bit of insight, good and bad, you need to figure out, especially if you've got a top 10 pick. You can't screw that up. So you're going to be looking at all of these things.
Yeah. I think that Nick Cousins is an interesting example, but in terms of whether or not performance in these fitness tests will move a guy up or down in their team's draft boards.
Well, I mean, as an example, there was the time where Sam Bennett couldn't do a pull-up, and
Right.
and that became like this huge thing. Oh my
That
God,
was a thing.
he can't do a pull-up. Well, how's Sam Bennett now? He's pretty good.
He's pretty good. As somebody who's never been able to do a pull-up in their entire life, I respect that tremendously.
There you go. And I was able to do a lot of them a long time ago. I probably can't do one now, but there is a certain technique to it. If you don't know it, it's going to be a struggle. So Casey Middlestat was another one. Now, Casey Middlestat, it turns out in retrospect, there were things to learn about him that, like, I don't think I knew until the last minute. So as an example, and I still think Casey Middlestat would be a decent NHLer, but he's coming out of high school, and I remember interviewing him after, this is before the draft, but after the combine. And at one point he had told me, he goes, yeah, I've never really worked out in my life. Like, I just would play hockey. And in my head, I was like, crap. If I knew that, that might have changed your ranking a little bit. Because now because as we saw, the process took a little bit longer for him to really stick in the NHL, and that's a part of it. It is.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about one of those prospects that is available in the draft coming up next. That's Marco Kasper. But first, we're going to hear about our friends at BetOnline.
BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
We have an important favor to ask you out there. Locked On has put together a survey so we can learn more about listeners just like you and make your favorite Locked On podcasts even better. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like, what you don't like about all our shows. So go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. It won't take very long. And if you complete a survey, you qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. That's a pretty sweet deal. So take our survey, go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey, and thanks for your help. All right, Russ, Marco Kasper. Man, I am a sucker for players from Austria as a huge Michael Raffel fan.
Mhm.
I have the jersey in my closet to prove it. And so I was intrigued when you wanted to talk about Marco Kasper. He is in the SHL though, plays
Mhm.
in Sweden. Also been on Team Austria for their World Junior team, and played in Worlds in 7 games. Played, he had 2 assists.
Mhm.
And in this season in the SHL, he had 7 goals, 4 assists for 11 points in 46 games played. But he also played in their under 20 league for part of the season and was pretty successful there. Right now, he is ranked somewhere between 14 and 31 overall, but I would say 17 to 19 is the sweet spot. If you look at most of the rankings, that's where he is. So this is a guy that you trade down for, right?
Yeah. Uh, he's a guy that, because of the World Championships, it gave like an extra set of eyes because you didn't get to see enough in the World Juniors, and you probably haven't watched enough of his regular season. So he's taken advantage of it. You know, he's had a good showing. He skates really well. He's a guy that can score near the net. He's got very good hands. He's tricky. He's another one of those guys that's sort of tricky in the offensive zone, and you got to have to keep tabs on him. And again, just a pro one timer. He's got a really good one timer. Now, on the downside is his two-way game up to speed? Probably not yet. And I think his speed can get a little better, like most players can, and his strength will get a little better. But he's pretty, he's at 6'1", 187 already, so he's pretty well developed. What you have to
Mhm.
decide with Marco Kasper is what comes up sometimes, and a scout taught me this, and he's right. Sometimes you get a guy, and what you see is what you get. Like, that's the ceiling. Hey, this is what he is, and and then sometimes you get a guy, and it's like, well, what's he gonna be? And I think Casper is somewhere in the middle. I think he's already got a developed body, but I still think there's more of his North American game that could be developed because he hasn't played a lot in North American ice. So that's the unknown part of this.
Yeah, and I think the fact that he's played in the Swedish league, which is a lower output league to begin with, says a lot in terms of if you look at just his point totals
Mhm.
purely as an evaluation tool. I don't think that's the best thing to do. You got to look at his complete game, and I think from what I've read and looking at highlights about him, is that he is really good away from the puck as
Mhm.
well, that he's really smart with his instincts and is in the right spot a lot and contributes to the overall success of his team in a really obvious way.
Yeah, I don't think he's necessarily a center either. I think he's probably a
Mhm.
winger because of those traits, and he is tricky in the offensive zone, and he definitely is smart, and he definitely knows how to get in the flow of the offense, and he's right place, right time. This is a guy that was not ranked anywhere near this at the beginning of the year, and now he is. So good for him. He's gotten extra notice. He's gotten on the board. From the Flyers' purposes, yeah, this would be a guy you look at if they trade down, and it doesn't mean you have to take them like 19 or 21 where I have them ranked. It means you could take them 12 or 13 if that's where you move down to because you made some sort of trade. So that's a guy that, yeah, even if they took him a few spots early, you could see what the talent level is here, and he's a guy worth taking a chance on. It's just with him is the trick is where are you going to pick him? I wouldn't pick him in the top 10.
Right. Right. And that's where I wonder, like, who is a team that's going to pick a guy like him if if the Flyers don't trade down,
Mhm.
and you look at who is picking around, then I wonder what kind of team chooses him in this draft, given his lower production, and are they going to want to take a risk, and are they going to know those other things?
Yeah, I think a team that takes him knows that right now he'll play in the SHL probably another couple of years,
Mhm.
or at least one more year if he blows up in the SHL. Fine, but like you said with the numbers, it's not like he was getting top power play or anything like that. So
Mhm.
there's a little bit for that, and then you have to have him come over here in North America, and chances are he's going to see some AHL time because of getting used to North American ice. So, you have to know that you're sort of in for it for, at least 3 to 4 years, at least. Like that's probably, unless for some reason he blows up next year, that's the likelihood. So then you have to decide, hey, are we good with that? Is that good with our long range plan? Me personally, I wouldn't have a problem with it. It all depends on where I'm picking him, though, because if I think there's a better guy out there, then that's fine. But me waiting for him, I'll wait for him.
Yeah, I wonder if Buffalo is a team that you can make a deal with to trade down for a guy like this, because they're at the 16 slot because of what they got for the Jack Eichel trade. And, they have 3 first-round picks, so it wouldn't be a huge thing to give up for them. As far as, sacrificing a second-round pick. They also have a bunch of second-round picks, including the Flyers' second-round pick next year that they could trade as well. And so, with all these trade-down guys that we've talked about, but especially a guy like this who is a little bit more of a project, that 16 pick looks pretty attractive.
Yeah, I could see 15 or 16, but 16, if another team says, hey, we want to get this pick, and they call Buffalo because as far as they're concerned, Kasper was already, higher on the board than where he is. That's the kind of team that would be looking for him. Like that's where the board matters. Like, if Kasper in their minds keeps slipping and they feel like, all right, it's getting to the point now where we think other teams are going to take him, well, then maybe we do have to get more aggressive to get him.
Right. And I think that given the Flyers' increased attention to the European play, we've talked about it on the last couple shows in terms of hiring Sami Kapanen and, drafting a guy like Marco Kasper, they'll have a lot of player development support for a guy like him.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, if a team like the Flyers at some point drafted him because they made another trade, got another first, whatever, yeah, he's a great guy to have in the system, because even if you don't think he's going to be a center, he's a guy that you're pretty sure is an NHLer. Like, you could look at him and say, this guy's going to play pro. It's just a matter of how's he going to hit. Is he a first liner or is he a second liner?
Listen, like I said at the beginning, I am here for all of the Team Austria, you guys. I do have a soft spot for that national team, but we'll see what the Flyers do. Again, we've been kind of approaching our draft coverage on will they pick at 5 or will they trade down? And we made the decision that if they do trade down, it won't be much past where Marco would be picked at. And so we got to look at both options here. And so Marco Kasper is a great potential prospect to discuss. Glad we got to do it. We'll add him to the spreadsheet. So again, we'll put that link in the show notes again in terms of where you can look at all the prospects we've talked about on the show thus far, if you're interested in our evaluation of any of them.
Spreadsheet. I'm horrible with spreadsheets, just so you know.
I love them. So this was a great spreadsheet to make, but we will come back and wrap up with our gritty thing of the week. Russ, this is your favorite time of the week, I know, where we get to talk about Gritty and what Gritty has been up to. I have to say, they've been putting out some more original content the last few weeks. They've been using some recycled material, but there's been some good stuff.
It's like Gritty's greatest hits. That's what they've been doing.
But this is all like new stuff, which is really great. Well, one's not. But so we'll start with that one, where there's an amazing Twitter account called Animals of Hockey, where they just post, amongst other things, pictures of hockey players with their pets, and it's phenomenal. And so they did a throwback of Drake Provorov meeting Gritty for the first time when Drake was still a little small puppy. So very, very cute. Those were some special times with Drake and Gritty. And then
very cute.
The other thing they put out, which I absolutely loved, because I just saw the movie for the Top Gun Maverick sequel that came out. They photoshopped Gritty into a bunch of stills from the original Top Gun, which is phenomenal. And you are just going to sit there in your wrongness
That's
Russ,
fine.
because Top Gun is a great movie. Top Gun Maverick is even better. I saw it at the Dolby Theater where you can feel the afterburners in the chair, and it was the greatest thing. If you haven't seen it,
The
go
greatest
see
thing.
it.
Now it's like the
It
greatest
was.
movie ever.
It was. It was a lot of fun. If you want to see a good summer movie, I think that Top Gun Maverick, you should go see it. And Gritty endorses. So you have that as well.
I've never even
And
seen what kind of movies Gritty likes, so that's the last thing I'm going with is his recommendation.
Russ, you're wrong. It's okay. You're allowed to be wrong, but you are very wrong about Top Gun. All right. The next item on the list is they are doing some off-season reconstruction of the Wells Fargo Center. So they got all the mascots for the teams to come in and throw some hammers around and break stuff. And that's always a lot of fun. So there's a couple of posts where you can see some clips from
Yeah,
that.
I'm interested to see what they're doing with that level. I've watched a few concerts from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like that they're trying to fix up the building a little bit between
Yeah.
seasons. And so, and it's, obviously not just for Flyers games, it's for Sixers games and indoor lacrosse and all of that stuff. So always like to see improvements to the Flyers venue. So we've got a couple clips of that. And then lastly, Gritty was getting sassy this time. Somebody tagged Gritty and said, "How many nipples do you have?" And Gritty replied, "None that I know of. I'll keep looking." So,
Not to shave
that's
down a little, maybe, it's a different story.
that's the best part about Gritty, though, is that they're able to create like children-focused content using the mascot and adult content as
True.
well. And I like that it's much like Sesame Street. There are things for the kids and there are things
All
for
right,
the
hold
grown-ups.
on, hold on. Gritty would get kicked off of Sesame Street first episode, right?
No,
Yeah.
they wouldn't, because that's what I'm saying is that the Flyers know how to make kid-friendly, gritty content, and they know how to make stuff for the grown-ups as well. And Sesame Street is great at that. There's
No,
always
I'm
jokes
telling
for
you,
the adults on Sesame Street.
even Tickle Me Elmo wouldn't be tickled if Gritty moved next door. I'm telling you right now.
Once again, I think you are wrong in your assessment, but that is okay. You are allowed to have those opinions. All right, that'll do it for today's show. We will be back again on Monday. We'll talk about the latest Flyers news. We're going to have a lot more draft content coming your way next week. On Monday specifically, we'll have our nemesis of the week, which is my favorite thing we do every week on the show. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. Send us in your mailbag questions, your draft questions via Twitter at LockedOnFlyers. You can also email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. You can also comment over on YouTube. I am Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
You made us your first listen today to make your second listen Locked On NHL. Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. You can hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. I'm on today's show, so go check it out. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great weekend, everyone.